Welcome to On the Edge with April Mahoney Brains. Here, this is the spot where the conversation is pointed, the guests are sharp, and the responses are never dull. Welcome home, Brains. There's only one requirement to hang out on the edge, is that you open your big brain and close your small mind. Did you bring your thinking caps? It's time to put them on, because the conversation starts now. Hello, and welcome back to On the Edge with April Mahoney Brains. This is the place where the conversation is pointed, the guests are sharp, and the responses are never dull. And we got a farmer. Does she look like a farmer?
Not today.
She is not a farmer. She is, she is a farmer because she lives on a farm, but she is a functional nutritional therapy practitioner. That's a mouthful. She lives on a regenerative farm. So we're going to talk about what that is. She gave me some great advice on wellness and really how to take care of herself. She's a mom of 2, and she loves helping women. And I'm so happy to have SallyAnne Kearns on the edge with me today. Okay, so Brains, sit back, relax, and get ready to get well. Here we go. How you doing, SallyAnne?
I'm so grateful to be here, April. Thank you so much.
So you just came back from holiday?
We had a week off up north near the beach because we're nowhere near the ocean where we live with the kids. So yes, it was wonderful to see my grandmother and my auntie and just sort of slow down.
How old's your grandma?
So she's 86 now. Yeah, 86.
Wow, she's still getting along pretty good?
She still lives at home. You know, she's relatively independent. I have my my thoughts on, you know, what she could and couldn't, what she could do. Very much that generation of pharmaceuticals. You know, I think post World War, migrated from Ireland. You know, lots of faith and belief, I guess, in the Western medical system. And it's been a long journey because she had a pretty intense car accident in her, I think she could have been in her 40s or late 40s, and she has just had chronic pain ever since, and but doesn't necessarily put the puzzle together around that inflammation piece in the body. And so, you know, I mean, I won't be able to necessarily change her, but I might be able to improve her hydration status to get her bowels moving.
Right, because inflammation is the cause of disease.
And it's rife, right? So we can experience inflammation from so many different foods, and it doesn't have to be just the traditional foods that we think of that are dangerous or, you know, not good for us. It can be broccoli, it can be beetroot, and so I'm really curious. I know
broccoli does to me. It inflames my intestines, and lactose. So yes. It's a lot of things, but you know what is life without a little milk or cream or cheese? You know, it's difficult. Let's dial back a little bit. Tell my brains a little bit about your experience and how nutrition and this type of work found you.
I was a real estate agent for majority of my career. I had a very successful commercial real estate business in Sydney with 35 staff, and I was about to open up another 2 offices, and I fell pregnant with my son in my mid-30s unexpectedly. Not really ready necessarily to start a family, but I'd finally met a man that I felt like I could spend the parenting journey with, and who's now my husband. And I got post baby number 1, I had an autoimmune condition come back, and I just couldn't get answers from the doctors. Nobody could give me any answers on why it was there, what I could do. But I basically got told that had I had any complications at birth, I would bleed out and die in that birthing process. So there was a lot of fear around that process, and just starting to navigate and connect the dots between the food that I ate and my mental health, because I had always suffered with chronic anxiety, but I'd shielded it with foods and alcohol and nicotine and all the things that I should never have done. So I had my baby and I fell apart.
You put the poison in your body, the nicotine and the alcohol? Wow, I know.
I just thought I was indestructible until I wasn't.
I mean, you know, that's what people do though. That's what people do. Sally, is they self-medicate.
Yes.
And then
because we don't know.
Well, they do that in combination with westernized medicine and little blue pill, little pink pill, and and then you just find yourself just all catawampus.
Yeah. And so I hit a wall, and I had such severe postnatal depression that I became suicidal.
Oh, wow.
Unexplainably. Then I fell pregnant again with my second son, and it got even worse. So I had to start really, I was already on that healing journey post baby number one, and I started to really connect the dots. So I know what it's like to feel a disconnect from purpose, a disconnect from life itself, and actually just not know who to ask. So I, constantly getting blood tests from the doctor, just saying something's not right. And they're like, oh, your iron's a little bit low, or your liver's not, working as well, or this or that. But it was always in normal range. And there was never anything so chronic that anybody took me seriously. And so that was really frustrating. So I had to pull it apart myself. And that's how I actually started studying to learn about myself and my own health and connect back into that intuitive eating and foods that were right for me.
And food is medicine, right? It's not just for snacking and gaining weight, but food is actually medicine. Okay, so we're going to get back to that, but I want to jump ahead. How in the world did you end up on a farm?
So my husband and I sold the real estate business. We moved to Victoria in Australia, and my husband was working 12-hour days. And so he was in an executive job. I was at home with the kids, and he had 4 friends suicide in the beginning of 1 year. Yeah, we had, these are men in their 40s and 50s, which were what we would deem outwardly as successful. And they suicided, and they declared to my husband at the time that they were weekend parents, in the sense that they never saw their kids until the weekend because I was so busy working. So I looked at my husband and I said, how much longer have you got doing what you're doing? And he said, about 2 years, in terms of burnout. And I went, well, I'm not going to wake up next to a dead husband. So I had a dream that I was an eagle flying through the mountains. And I woke up the next morning, and I connected. This dream really resonated with me. And I woke up the next morning. I said, we got to move. We just renovated this house in Melbourne, and we had, I said, we've got to move. We need to move to the country. So we came to Mudgee, which I was familiar with, for a week. And Ray applied for a job. We got it. We thought, bugger it, we'll move. So we've always wanted a farm. However, we couldn't connect the dots between living in the city and being a weekend farm owner because of the responsibilities that need to be conducted on a farm. You need to be here full time, unless it's just a hobby. So we bought a farm, and we've spent the last year renovating, and we are, we've got the chickens, the organic chickens, we've got the bees, we've got the lamb, the organic lamb. Yeah, so
questions. I hate to interject, but there's a couple things that I kind of want to touch on before we move forward. I love how you say I fell pregnant.
Yes. Yeah, it's true.
We say we got pregnant. We didn't fall pregnant. So that's cute. That's cute. The second thing, is there a high rate of suicide among Australians?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know what the statistics are, but there really is. That mental health piece is just so prominent, and it's not something that's openly talked about, but particularly within the farming communities, with post-drought, and we've recently had a mouse plague where we are, and I'm not talking about a couple of mice, I'm talking about hundreds and thousands of mice, and it can be quite it's destabilizing. You've got mice crawling all through your stuff, and you don't know how to deal with it. You don't want to bait them or poison them because you've got dogs and kids, and and if they get poisoned, then the birds eat the mice, and then the birds get poisoned. So you have to look at that holistic cycle. It's never just stop here. And I guess that touches into that regenerative piece. It's about every action has a reaction.
Absolutely. And I was talking to some veterinarians that there is a high rate of suicide among veterinarians. And I wouldn't have thought that. I'm saying they have the ability to save an animal's life that doesn't communicate the same way that we do, and that, they're able to do that, it is huge. And so they're saying that mental health piece, but they become adaptive to the dying process. They become numb to it. And
Wow.
it's that mental health piece that's involved. And mental health is something that you can't see. You don't
No.
know when you're going to go from a flicker to a flame. You don't know what somebody is suppressing. You don't know what generational trauma that they're going through. You don't know what kind of inflammation is in their brain, and there's a lot going on. But I'm hearing that a lot among Australians, that there's a high rate of suicide there. And I'm really hoping that, great people like you are telling their story, like you're doing here with us on The Edge, to really let people know that there's no shame associated with this, that it is a medical condition that can be controlled, there can be help, and you can heal from it or learn to deal with it. Learn to deal with it. Okay, so I'm sorry to have interjected, but that was so important. I didn't want to miss that point. So now you're on the farm and you've got these mice. Girl, I would, talking about moving, I would have moved again. They could have had the farm, okay? I can't be bothered with all of that. Okay, so you got the mice are gone, but what are you raising? You got the chickens, and then didn't you say you're also doing lamb? Is it lamb?
Lamb, yeah, lamb, yeah. So we, it's interesting you talk about that veterinarian piece. It's that we slaughtered our first sheep here for the first time. I've not watched an animal die before, but I don't think I've ever watched anything die before, if I'm completely honest. Not being present. And
I just saw my mother die, and let me tell you, it was a rite of passage. And also, she gave me some great advice on chicken feed. We'll talk about that later. But it is a transition. Now, did the kids get to see it?
No, they're 2 and 4. So I probably thought a little too early. But I can't kind of explain the appreciation that you have for the food that you're eating and the preparation method that comes with it once you watch that animal's life drop out of its body.
Well, I do.
And
I pray over everything.
Yeah.
I pray over everything.
Yeah.
I pray for the sacrifice. I pray for the person that had to butcher it. I pray for the person that packed it up in my grocery bag. There is a sacrifice there. It is a sacrifice.
Yeah.
Did it change your perspective on eating meat?
I think with what I teach clientele is that, protein, I know that there's lots of choices and there's lots of advice around, veganism and we are a human species. We need protein, and we need protein in a digestible form. I think if we all started from 100% health, then maybe veganism could be a possibility, but we're not, right? And usually people, when they stop craving meat and they're not satisfied by it, or they go off red meat, that's a clue. And so there's thousands of clues in the body that either the hydrochloric acid status has diminished, which it does naturally after the age of 40 anyway, but it could be diminished to the point where they don't feel like meat, and that becomes the start of their journey. So a lot of people that you meet that go into that vegan stage will say, I feel better. Well, they will, because the nutrients is more bioavailable to them, and it's not putting as much pressure on the digestive system. But if their I query, I wonder if their digestive system was optimized, would they still feel that way if that, eating protein? And so did it change my view on meat? I think it's just made me recognize that as long as you've got your plate and you've got your 10% healthy fat, which is the minimum, you got your 30% protein, and then you've got your 60% carbohydrate, complex carbs, veg, then you're home and host, right? So it's just about playing with that variation and just making sure on every single plate that you eat, there's that healthy fat, because the healthy fat's going to help you break down the protein. The protein's going to help you break down the complex carbohydrates. And it's a symbiotic relationship. If we're missing one of those components, our digestion will never be optimized. So yes, it made me recognize that you need to eat nose to tail. Like, we kept all the internal organs, and I will be using those. But interestingly, I still have the same respect for animal protein. I just think that we don't need to overdo it, and we need to be more mindful of the cuts that we eat. We can't just pick the prime steak. You want the connective tissues and all of those other elements.
My father, growing up, my father would not allow pork to be consumed in our house because of, a pig will eat anything.
Yeah.
But then you look at lamb and you look at cows, and they are vegetarians. They eat straw and grass. I know when I went to the zoo here, I got a behind the scenes view with the zoo of the silverback gorillas. Oh, I love them. Their fur was like mink.
Wow.
They're vegetarians. You look at elephants, they're vegetarians. So there's something to that. But then also something to a good piece of meat or a good piece of lamb. But again, like you said, there has to be a balance. I totally understand that there's a balance there. So now you've seen the slaughter of an animal, and you now I don't want to go too much into this, but they don't euthanize the animals before they slaughter them. Okay.
So this was so a lot of the methodology with lamb in the past has been to cut the animal's neck, which I don't feel is the most humane way to terminate an animal's life, because it's not instant. So the butcher that we used came to our premises and terminated the animal's life by shooting it in the head. So it was immediate. It was an immediate death. And in my view, more humane than they electric shock them, and there's other strategies. And it was really, these little lambs that were born on my farm and raised on my farm and finished on my farm, and were respected and cherished and honored. And look, I know that meat is such a polarizing topic. It's up there with vaccines, right? So,
but it's,
eating meat, not eating meat.
It's realistic, because when you go in there and get that rack of lamb and you sit there and, or you make a gyro or whatever, I mean, it's the cycle of life, it really is. And so, there is no, you can't be caught up in your feelings, because you are a human and you don't want to be desensitized. I get it. But at the end of the day, it's about the food chain, and it's about life.
I had the chance to podcast a gentleman by the name of Mike Parrish, who is an Australian regenerative farmer, one of the best that I'm aware of in this country, and has done for 30 years. And so his premise was that this whole, for soy crops or corn crops, there are that many insects and rodents and birds and killed to try and maintain that crop's integrity. So you can't just look and say, okay, well, we're not going to eat meat, because the insects die and the birds get killed, and deers get killed from trampling the crops, etc. So it's not just, I don't want to eat meat because I want to do the right thing by the planet. Well, it's not that simple, and I think it's a conversation that needs to be unlocked. But I'd much prefer to get my chicken from there's a beautiful local farmer here who raises a completely Australian, like a heritage bred chicken. They're completely pasture raised and finished. They've got their own butchery, and they've won awards. But you eat the chicken from this particular farmer, and that whole process is as ethical as possible, and that the animals are living a natural life.
I know.
And the nutrient density is extraordinary.
Here in the United States, there has been a big brouhaha about the unethical treatment of cattle and chicken. They're in these little tiny pens. They lay the egg. They don't get to walk around, and I am very conscious about the meat that I eat. I go to the butcher. I make sure that it's corn fed, that it's fresh. The chicken, my husband, you can tell the difference from one egg. I pay more for them versus the other.
Yes.
Even when you boil it, how you unpeel it, how it sticks to the shell. When you crack it, sometimes I crack these eggs and I got twins in there. You got double yolk. So we have a big problem with that. You know, we have a big problem with that. They're not cage free, and on our boxes of eggs it says, you know, cage free animals, or, you know, corn fed, or whatever that is. So it's very, very important. But let's get to the bees.
Yeah.
You're making honey there?
Yeah, well, we was one of my husband's intent. He always wanted bees, and so we've got some bees. We harvested honey just before winter, about a month and a half ago, and we got 10 litres out of the first part of the hive. And bees are fascinating, and so our intention with the bees was to ensure that when I do the market garden and I get all my gardening going early next year, we will have an orchard, etc. But they can pollinate, you know, so there's this real symbiotic relationship. And honey is a much better alternative than sugar, refined sugar. So it's the sweetener of choice that I would suggest to most clients if they're just having that issue with blood sugar.
But bees are so important to pollination and to the environment. We got another problem here in the United States with bees. You know, I see them, I run. Now, yeah, because of, you know, a bee sting. But, you know, I've seen this woman on, I don't know if she's on Instagram or on YouTube, and she's out there. She's not covered. She's going right to the beehive. She's pulling out the little screen with all the honey on them. She's gently, you know, she is communing with nature. You know, she is definitely a queen bee. Do you go out there and commune with them?
I haven't. My husband did the last round of harvesting and ended up, I shouldn't laugh, but did end up getting stung multiple times. The conditions weren't right. It was too windy and there wasn't enough smoke, because you use the smoke to deter them and confuse them so that they don't sting you. So we probably, you know, we're learning as well. And so he did end up with quite a histamine response, and it can be quite dangerous if you've been stung multiple times. So we, you know, he did have to rush to the hospital and be monitored for a while. But I think, like anything, they're protecting their environment, they're protecting their reproductive rights. So, you know, we're invading their colony, so they're going to do what they need. But they are very incredible beings, and they can smell the fear on you. So if you've been stung in the past, they actually can sense your pheromones. So it has been an interesting ride, and we're still learning. Like, we've been here on the farm now a year, and we've achieved a fair bit, just, you know, getting, you know, the chickens and the bees and the lambs going. And, you know, it's been it's a journey. Like, we've lost our first lambs out of in the last 2 rounds of lambing, and because of either frost or they didn't latch. So when they didn't latch onto the mother, that, you know, they obviously die. So you know, you do have to step in. You have to obviously observe and let nature do its thing, but you also do step in when it's needed. It's been a really fascinating process. Nature actually knows exactly what it's doing if we just actually get out of the way a lot of the time.
But there's a big expense to this too. There's a lot of overhead. You know, veterinarian bills are not cheap, because the animal can't tell you, you know, I got a stomach ache or I got a headache. You know, you've got to have that. And then too, the birthing process. So you are a lifelong learner, and you are a woman in business that has been able to pivot and shift. And I dig that. I mean, you have went from one extreme to the other. What would you say to a woman that is in that transition and that is ready to pivot and shift her life?
I think we only get one chance at this. So, you know, you decide how you want to live. If you're not showing up and feeling authentic and fulfilled, then you need to make decisions that are going to serve you and take you towards that. So I don't want to go to my grave and go, gee, I wish I bought a farm. You know, I want to be the best. I want to show up and be the best example to my children around taking risks, you know, being tenacious, showing up, being resilient, being observant, being curious. You know, they're all traits that we're entitled to as a human being. So let's just have fun with it while we go along.
There's something very fascinating that you shared with me. It's called the pulse test. Tell us a little bit about that.
So one of the things that I'm most passionate about, particularly with that mental health piece and anxiety, is foods that are giving us a sensitivity and a reaction, an inflammatory response, that are creating that anxiety or that anxious feeling that we get in our body, where we feel, you know, unnecessarily overwhelmed about something. And so that is a clue that there is a food in your diet that is giving you an inflammatory response. Now, there's a few reasons that that could be happening. One is that you've been eating inflammatory foods for so long and that your gut has been permeated. So everything is an inflammatory response. Or you don't have that issue and there's a particular food that's driving your body crazy and setting off that histamine response, like with the bees, right? But it's doing it internally. So what you can do is you can take your pulse for 60 seconds prior to eating a food, just being relaxed in a parasympathetic state. Put the food in your mouth for 30 seconds. You don't have to swallow it. Retake your pulse for a minute. If it's gone up by more than 6, you have an allergic tension to that food, and you should not have it in your healing journey at this point in time. If your blood type is O positive, that's a 4, not a 6. So you want to start navigating with these foods in isolation to really discover which foods are creating that allergic tension. And that's kind of where the magic happens. So that's what I'm really passionate about. That's often the linchpin that's keeping people from where they want to be or where they are to where they want to be with their health. And then doing that deeper healing work for their large and small intestine, and then figuring out if there's any parasitic activity that's happening in there that might need to be corrected, so to speak. But often with functional nutrition, we work north to south. So, you know, food and digestion starts in the mind and ultimately goes through that cascade and then out through the bowel movement. So you want to make sure that you're regularly going to the toilet. But that Cocos Pulse test is something that you can do and without spending thousands of dollars on food tests.
Well, I'm going to try that, because when I went to Beijing, China, that's exactly how they checked my liver, my kidney, and my spleen, through my pulse. You know, there was no invasiveness. You know, they looked in my eyes, they looked at my tongue. So there's a lot of things that you can explore very systematically and simplistically. That's cool.
I love that you've touched on that. So sorry to interject, but it's interesting you talk about Chinese medicine, because a functional clinical assessment that a functional nutritionist does, we palpate up to 35 points on the body to determine the inflammation at that point. Ooh. Then we lingual neurotest. So we actually can put a nutrient in your mouth that's therapeutic and determine whether or not that nutrient's going to support you to bring your body back into balance. So it's a very hands-on, you know, there's the first stage of the process, but for people that they've bloody tried everything and they can't get to the root cause of what's actually creating the systemic problems.
Right.
That's where this is really, really powerful. And it's very much likened to that meridian system that corresponds to those internal organs. That's why I love what I do.
Yeah. Okay. Now, 2 more great questions. Before we get into the book, I want to ask you a little bit about your work environment. Do you have your own little she shed there on the farm where you work with clients?
I do, actually. So a lot of the work that we do, I have an online program. So that's almost like a prerequisite to doing the one-on-one stuff. And that, you know, clients that have engaged in that program that's online, they've had phenomenal shifts that can catapult them for life, you know, to really educate them about what they should be eating for life, because we've been given a lie around this low fat, this pyramid that, you know, that was actually created by Sanitarium around eating all these wheats and grains.
Well, you know what? I think it's a marketing strategy too. You'll go in the grocery store and you've got fat-free, gluten-free, sugar-free, la, 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 la. And how do you know? Or this is another one, organic. How in the world do you know that it was really grown organic? Was the water purified? Was the soil? Did you not use pesticides? Or is this a marketing strategy? You know, so you have to be careful and, you know, try to be consistent as far as your supplier, you know, and how you're feeling when you eat certain things. Like I said, the eggs, you know, I'm not buying a certain brand of eggs at a certain location. I'm going somewhere else where I feel more comfortable and it feels comfortable for me. So I'm sorry, go back to that. I have to touch on these great points when you get to them or I'll forget them.
So I do have a she shed. I've got a clinic on the farm. So basically it's an independent space to our house, which is where the magic happens. So that's where a lot of the work these days is via Zoom and online, but that functional assessment can only be done in person. And we do have a farm stay accommodation here for people that are traveling, and that's, you know, part of the offering once they've done the first piece of that puzzle. But
I think that's,
you know, I love that you,
because they're going to get a full experience. You're going to be able to see nature. You're going to be able to work on your health. You're going to be able to see the animals. You're going to see regenerative farming. You're going to see sustainability. You're going to see a beautiful mother and 2 boys and a father, you know, that changed their life. You're going to see the bees. So that's a lot of great stuff going on there. I would love to come and visit.
anytime. Doors are always open once the mice go.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how we're going to get rid of, and you know what I've noticed too? I'm just saying, Australia, when you guys get hit with something, I mean, you get overrun. You don't just get a little bit, you get just a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm glad you're able to deal with it. Now, let's turn to the pages of your book. You are a contributor in an anthology. Tell my brains about that. Do you have the book?
Yeah, so I don't actually. It's on its way from Amazon, but the printed version came the second round, which is a bit sad that it's not here. I should really have it. So yeah, I was invited to or co-author in a book called Intuitive: Knowing Her Truth, and my topic or my chapter was on intuition plus nutrition equals ultimate vitality. And it's interesting, you talked about your own experience with these eggs and how does it make you feel? And I think that is, we need to get back to that. So instead of looking externally for someone to sort of tell us what to eat, I'm really passionate about, well, how is that food responding in your body, you know, through that pulse test and through the digestive reactions, and putting that chapter together, I guess. So the book was really fun. We hit bestseller in 6 countries. It's like $1.28 on Amazon. That's Australian, which is about 99 cents US. And all proceeds go to Barter, which is a mental health charity in Australia for teens and youths. So, you know, this wasn't about profit. It was just 28 women sharing their journey with intuition. For me, it was very much about linking that nutrition component, because nutrition for me was the gateway to physical, emotional, and spiritual health.
Wow.
And has opened my heart to, you know, universal intelligence, God, if you like, and that real connection piece with nature. So I'm not sure if that was my journey to those things. But if you're looking for something else, nutrition, once you start removing the inflammatory foods and start playing with what's creating that sensitivity for you, it's almost impossible not to connect with divine purpose, you know, and yourself. Like, how am I really feeling, and what's that, you know, and peeling back those layers. And if you're someone like me that's come from that, you know, traumatic life, you know, childhood and stuff like that, and you're really wanting to sort of navigate, food can be a really beautiful pathway to this thing that is so popular these days called self-love. You know, it's that nourishment piece. So instead of deprivation, I love teaching women how to never diet again, because you shouldn't have to. It's not about deprivation, it's about nourishment. And as you say, the intention that you set for your food, so blessing and being grateful, etc. So the book was a really fun experience, and there's some incredible stories in it. Like, it's just
I bet.
Yeah.
When they reveal their self and they open their self up to vulnerability, it's such a learning opportunity. It's such a healing, and that's on everyone's lips right now, talking about generational trauma, how to heal that.
Yeah.
Another thing is inflammation and disease, and suppressing your emotions, how that internalizes and turns into disease. But there's also great conversations on regenerative medicine, integrative medicine, holistic medicine, no medicine, meditation, music. There's a lot of good things that are still going on in the world, brains. Don't think that this is the end. It's not. This could be your new beginning. And so you can start that by working with someone like Sally, who is amazing and has walked the walk and talking the talk. Tell my brains how to get in contact with you if they want to purchase a copy of the book, if they want to get some fresh lamb, or you know, some honey, or just have a great conversation about nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Facebook as SallyAnne Kearns. I do have a business page on there, but I'm not very active, if I'm honest. If you want to reach out to me, it's holdinghandswellness.com.au. And you're welcome to shoot me an email, Sally@holdinghandswellness, or just give me a call. My numbers are listed on the site. And yeah, like, let me help you get your health goals in check, you know, and you can do it through food. You really can.
We forgot to talk about the chicken feet, but we'll talk
Yes.
about that. We'll talk about that later, the power of the marrow in the bones of animals as well, how healthy that can be. Thank you so much for being on the edge, Sally. Come back and let me know how things go, you know, 6 months from now. Tell your husband just to get him a suit, because we don't want him to get stung by those bees anymore. And just continue to be the love that you are and keep that big dimple shining. I got one too. It's really important because you look like a happy, healthy, well-balanced woman, and I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here on The Edge.
Thank you, April.
Cheers.
Cheers.